Hello and welcome back to the channel. I've been off for quite a while now, but I've finally got around to getting back onto filming some content with the bikes. And this is a little beauty I've just picked up. It's a 1933 Rudge 250 radial 4 valve. So called because it's got a hemispherical head and the valves are radial around the circumference of the head. I picked this up from a guy near Cardiff whose granddad bought the bike new in 1933 and it's been in his family ever since. It's got some really interesting history. So he had this bike and did a few conversions on it. I believe he was an engineer, and so there's some really cool little modifications being made to it over the years. The story is that it was stripped in the 70s for a rebuild, and then it was stored ever since and never went back together. His family decided that they sort of weren't going to get around to doing it, and so I was lucky enough to be able to buy it. I'm going to do a little video series on getting it up and running and getting it on the road. I've been looking for something small and lightweight that I can run around on locally, and I love pre-war motorcycles, and this is the perfect candidate. So I'm going to hopefully do this up as a good reliable run around that I can use for zipping around locally and maybe take to some shows. So when I got this bike, the tank was in red oxide primer, and I was really hopeful that underneath it was going to be the original paint. Unfortunately, it was probably taken back to bare metal when it was stripped down in the 70s. And it's a real shame because, as you can see, the tank is really straight with no real rot on it, and so I bet the original paint job was pretty nice. But it's unfortunately it's not there, so I'm left with deciding how I'm going to finish this bike. So on the Rudge, you've got the petrol in the right hand side of the tank, and then there's a compartment in the left hand side of the tank, sorry, and then there's a compartment on the right hand side where the engine oil goes. Wilfred had made this little oil tank that it was going to fit in here. This is kind of like the TT bikes had, so I believe was going to disconnect the oil from the petrol tank and run this remote oil tank down here. I think I'm going to put the oil back in the tank as everything looks good, and down here I'm probably going to run a battery because this bike didn't have any charging system, but as I say, I want to use the bike, so really I could do some lights on it. So I'll probably make a nice little leather battery bag or something that mounts down here to hold the battery.
Who'll be making the leather battery bag?
My partner will be making a leather battery bag. So on the underside of the tank, you can see you've got the link pipe that links the fuel to both sides, the fuel outlet, and here is the oil fittings for the feed and return oil lines. So I've run a tap down these, and it turns out they're just 5/8 UNF, which is nice because these old bikes, it could be anything. I was concerned that it might be Whitworth fine thread, as these are Rudge Whitworth motorcycles, but luckily it's just 5/8 UNF. So I've ordered some banjo bolts and some banjo fittings. The return line, however, on the banjo fitting I'll have to weld a piece of tube up that brings the return line up to the top of the tank, because it needs to return above the oil level, and it's also good to be able to take the cap off and just watch that the oil is returning to know that you've got circulating oil. So that's the tank. So I think the bike has just been loosely put together so that all the parts were kept as one. It doesn't feel like there's any bearings in the headstock, so I'll strip that down and have a look what's going on there. I was quite surprised to see that the handlebars are actually 1-inch handlebars on this lightweight motorcycle. So I've got a few options for handlebars. We'll look at that when I get round to it. It's a real shame that the steering dampener Bakelite knob is cracked, but it's broken. If anyone knows where I can get hold of one of these, that'd be really, really great, because I'd like to put that back how it should be. The rest of the frame, I'm not actually going to paint it. I'm going to sort of keep it in this sort of as found, bound fine condition. I want it to be sort of a dirty, usable motorcycle. I don't want it to be some sort of pristine show winner. The first thing I'm going to tackle on this bike is the engine. It was thought that this was rebuilt in the 70s, but there's a couple of things that are concerning me a little. Firstly, if you get hold of the sprocket shaft and just wiggle it backwards and forwards, there's a slight knocking, like there's a play somewhere. This isn't too bad, however I'd like to take the engine in pieces and inspect it, as if there's play in the big end bearing or something like that, the engine will soon knock itself to pieces and damage it for far worse than it is now. So it's also 50 odd years since it's been rebuilt, so it's going to be good to have a look inside and just see what's going on. Another cool thing is the carburettor. I've never seen one like this, so I believe this is a AML pre-monoblock, but the carburettor is actually mounted sideways with the remote float chamber straight up. I think it looks really cool. I noticed that the tickler is missing from the float chamber, so I'll do a video on rebuilding the carb and sorting that out. But I'm hoping to return this carburettor and as many of the original parts as I can use. It's always just quite loose enough on a spanner, but not loose enough to get my fingers.
So what have you done?
So there's just 4 head bolts. They're actually quite loose, which kind of makes me think it wasn't ready to run. I should just be able to lift the head up and off the push rods, I hope. So I was going to try and leave all the adjustments as they were, just to see if it'll run as is. Well, nearly as is, because I just want to have a bit of a look at what's going on. It's also interesting because there's a spare piston in the box. I'm just wondering what's being done, because when these bikes were made, it was normal to run fairly low compression ratios, as the fuel was pretty bad. So as the fuel's improved, it's possible to get a bit more power by bumping up the compression ratio. So it'd be interesting to see just what piston's in there. Right, that's the last of the bolts. Let's take the carburettor off. I say a lot of things just seem to be hand tight. So it's probably good to go back to the beginning and run through it from the start. It's got a really cool little bell mouth. I don't know if it's been homemade. I say the guy that first had it was an engineer, so I presume quite a lot of the little bits and bobs have been made by him. Right. So the outer push rod is the inlet. To remember that. Drop. So there's a lot of grease in there, and it doesn't particularly look like it's been run. So there is some place somewhere there. The board actually looks quite good. Can't feel any ridges on it, and there's no gouges. That looks like quite a lot of piston slop though. I'd have to check what the specs are, but that looks like quite a lot. The head, again, is just kind of full of grease.
Is that a good thing?
And I said someone's probably been in here and cleaned everything up. So you can see the radial, so it's a hemispherical head, as in half a circle, and the valves are radially positioned. I've actually got over here a Rudge 500 cylinder head with the parallel valves. bad place. So this, you can see the head is like a pent roof combustion chamber, and the valves are two sets of parallel valves. Now, parallel as opposed to radially.
I think you need to move it from there.
Yeah. I think I need to find a drier place to be working on these. Or storing them at least. Right, I'll just pull the cylinder off. Don't know if that fin is broken there and there, or if that's the shape they were.
It looks that shape, to be fair. That's.
Yeah, but I don't know why it would be that shape. Seems the head bolts don't come out. I must have to take the cylinder off to get the head bolts out. Oh, it's that push rod. Let's pick that up. Again, the cylinder base nuts are pretty loose. So, I don't really know what's going on. Someone's obviously had it in bits. So I'm quite keen to see where this play is. I suspect it's going to be in the big end. So I think the engine's going to be coming completely in pieces. I don't know how difficult parts are to get for this, but I'm presuming that it'll just have needle rollers for the big end, and generally with things of this sort of age you could get oversized rollers, so hopefully it can be honed and just have oversized rollers fitted, but we shall see when we get into it. So I don't know how easy crank pins and things are to come by.
You got it? There's a tube. That survived well, that tube.
I don't think it'll be original 1933.
No. Wasn't meaning that.
So, cylinder does look pretty good. So I've seen this before. So the gudgeon pin is retained by brass buttons.
Can you show it?
So on the end of the gudgeon pin, should be able to come out, there's just this brass button that rubs against the side of the cylinder. The problem with these is when the brass wears, the pin travels and gouges the cylinder. So I need to be really careful that they remain proud of the ends of the gudgeon pin. So now the moment of truth is applying the big end. Yes, not too excessive. Yeah, just playing the big end. So it's not too excessive, so hopefully I can just put in some oversized rollers and hone it to fit. But I'd say the crankshaft needs to come to pieces. Let's see what the small end bearing's like. Small end bush feels okay. engine's going to be stripped. So, interestingly on this piston, there isn't an oil control ring. You've just got your 2 compression rings.
Move your hand.
So if we just have a look at, say, the top compression ring and the cylinder, the ring gap at the bottom looks pretty good. Let's go to the ring gap actually looks pretty good. I'll have to get a feeler gauge in there and measure it, but the ring gap looks okay. See the end of the ring there, it looks like it's been filed, so these must be filed to fit rings, which means they come oversized, and you file the ends of them to achieve the right ring gap. Again, that ring gap looks pretty good, so that's good
You did
news.
well then.
Oops. Just want to measure that because that looks quite excessive.
What does that mean then? It's a different piston or?
Well, the bore looks good. The bore looks good. And there's no, where the piston ring travels to, usually you'd get a step because it doesn't travel, the ring doesn't travel right to the top of the cylinder. So you'd get a step if you had a lot of bore wear. And I can't feel that. I do have to measure it because the bore will be largest in the centre where the piston rings travel most often. But I don't think the cylinder's bad. I just suspect it's the wrong size piston. And I also suspect the pistons are pretty difficult to find. Because you see the shape of this is for the hemispherical cylinder head. As I was talking about, that gap there, so your compression ratio is your swept volume, so the cylinder size, divided by the clearance volume. So the distance, the volume between the top of the piston and the cylinder head in there is the clearance volume or compression volume. So to increase the compression, you can make this dome larger. So I'm going to have to look into if pistons are available, but one option is to find a different piston that is the right size for the bore, or I can rebore and then shape the top of the piston to match the cylinder head. But I'll have to do some measuring for that. I've actually got a Van Norman boring machine. That should go small enough to do this. Right, next job, engine out then. So the next step now is to take the engine out and strip it down so I can get to the crankshaft. I'll probably get the engine on the bench and then do a video stripping it down and inspecting the components. Removing from the bike is a relatively straightforward process, pretty boring, so won't bore you with that part. We'll just get the engine out and have a look at it. So I've tried spinning the engine before and realised it wasn't a spark. I pretty much expected to have to clean the points on the Magneto, and sometimes you just have to give them a really good spin to sort of get them back into life. But with the top end of the engine off, I thought I'd just give it a little spin over, and the Magneto has actually come back to life. So that's good news. Because the Magnetos is one of the things that's going to stop you being able to start the bike, so I'm really pleased that that's actually sparking. So some losses, some wins. Finally got the engine in bits, and it's not brilliant news, but it's also not terrible news. So I've measured the piston clearance in the bore, and although the bore looks nice and straight and parallel, the piston has about a 25 thou gap, which is quite a lot too much. I'd like to see it around sort of 5 to 8 thou. The rings were actually sized correctly, so I presume I struggled to get a piston at the time of rebuilding it. But I'm going to try and get a piston and bore it and get that piston clearance down. The crankshaft was just starting to go. The crank pin is showing a bit of wear, a visual wear, as are the rollers. This is the earlier type. I believe this is the correct bearing cage, which it comes in sort of 2 halves. But I can't find one of those as yet. So I'm doing a little bit of thinking. I'd like to update the internals if possible to things that are sort of easier to get and maybe a little bit harder wearing, because I want to use this bike and give it quite a lot of stick, so I want to have the engine easier to rebuild next time. Interestingly, when I looked at the flywheels, I think this knife edging has been done. I don't think this is factory standard, and when you look closer to it, you can see file marks. It actually looks like it's been done by hand, which baffles me as to how we could get it so precise, but it's, yeah, it looks like it's certainly been cleaned up with a file. The engine casings are fairly good. There's a little bit of corrosion here on the bottom of this one, and there's a little bit of damage around one of these stud holes here. I was concerned that these might be magnesium because they felt fairly light, so I did the little magnesium test on it, where you just clean a bit of the aluminium surface and put on a bit of white vinegar, and if it fizzes, it's magnesium alloy, and if it doesn't appear to do anything, you can be pretty sure it's aluminium. So I'm quite happy that these are aluminium. So later on today I'll get this welded up and reshaped. But other than that, the engine's not in terrible condition. I think I've caught it at the right time, whereas if I'd have run it, it'd have ended up causing more damage. So as I get some parts and work out what I'm doing, I'll make another video.